Kirsty, it's been 3 years of unprecedented challenges from pandemic, Brexit, global instability, energy price hikes, etc., etc. What are the leadership challenges you've had to face over the last 3 years?
Obviously the same as pretty much everybody else, particularly in manufacturing. And I think the main one is coping with another crisis that comes around the corner and not reacting to it. You need to look at it dispassionately and go, how is this going to impact us? What tools can we use to mitigate it as best as we can? Is there anything we can do about it? And whilst you can't ignore it, you've got to compartmentalise it and put it away, because otherwise, quite frankly, we'd all be nervous wrecks.
I wondered how much you were affected at a personal level, and also perhaps did you notice in your team anybody feeling the pressures from all of this and the interaction, how it affected your interaction with them?
Definitely. I think if we go back to 2020, that wonderful March, nobody knew what was going to happen. And there was an awful lot of anxiety amongst the team. Some of the team had vulnerable family members and they were scared. Others, were scared on, are they going to be able to earn a living? What does furlough mean? Can I not come to work? And it was all really, really scary. And personally, and I've spoken about this before, when we sort of sent some people to work from home, furloughed the majority, and I stayed on site with my two senior guys. My initial reaction was, we're going to finish out the week, have 2 weeks off like we do at Christmas, lose 20 grand and come back and it will all be over. And it wasn't. and I'd just spent £500,000 on putting new plant in literally 6 months before. So I'm like, well, there goes my house then, because the bank's going to want that back. But at the same time, you've got to support those people, particularly those that aren't on site, because you need to make sure your communication encompasses what they're feeling. So you need to make sure there's group communication. You need to be keeping an eye on if you're getting responses from people. If you're not getting responses, then you need to call those. And it just adds more things to do and to worry about. And you only need to miss one comment or email, and that's going to really affect the individual. So it's just trying to keep on top of all of that. But yeah, quite a lot of the team here, like everybody, were really anxious in the beginning. They really were.
Whatever skills you have as a leader, did you acquire them? Were you born with them? Pardon me. Did you just grow into them? How would you credit that process, that evolution for you?
I think it's a mixture of all three. I think the experience and learning and growing into them is the biggest contributor. If I look back at how I was as a leader 20 years ago, completely different to how I am now. I'm a lot more considered. I've never been a calm, quiet person at all. But I'm a lot more considered in how I do things now, particularly when it comes to leadership skills, rather than the reactive than I would have been 20 years ago. It's almost that sort of, you develop a pause in your brain. You're up to your eyes running around and somebody needs you. Me 20 years ago would have been, what now? Whereas now it's, take a breath. How can I help? And just learning that. And that just comes with experience and falling on your nose a few times and doing it wrong and learning from those mistakes.
There are a very substantial number of SMEs in the UK that are run by women, but comparatively fewer in the manufacturing sector. When you became MD of Professional Polishing Services 15 years ago, did that traditionally lopsided balance, gender balance in the industry, cause you any problems, any issues when you became MD?
Not when I became MD. I think most people thought I was already, because I had previously been director and general manager for probably 5 years. And 15 years ago, I was sort of like hitting 20 years in service. So I was well known, hopefully well respected. So it wasn't so much as an issue. And I will definitely say that a lot of the meetings I attended with 10 people in the room, I was frequently the only woman in the room. And you sort of get immune to it when it's your industry centric, because you know everyone around the table and they know you. It's when you go into a wider manufacturing meeting or event. Even, this year, I went to a manufacturing business briefing, breakfast meeting, and I think there was probably 40 people in the room and maybe 4 or 5 were women. I went and sat at a table. There was 3 or 4 men at the table. I was completely ignored until the gentleman who was running the organisation came over and went, "I'm so glad you're here. Will you talk about this for me? Will you do a short presentation?" And I was like, "Yeah, of course." And then everybody was like, "Oh, hi, pleased to meet you." But they greeted the chap that had come up to the table. They just ignored me. And some days I'll be proactive and go up and go, "Hi, pleased to meet you." And some days, you know what, I can't be bothered either. It's just one of those.
Yeah, well, soon may the change come. Is it stating the blindingly obvious, or perhaps it may be far too much of a generalization, you tell me, that women have different leadership styles from men?
I think they do. I'm probably the wrong person to ask because my leadership style is much more masculine than feminine. I'm very goal orientated. I'm very driven. I'm very focused. I do that, do that, do that. You know, I I do have soft skills. Every human being has soft skills. Mine are not at the forefront as much as perhaps other women's. And that's going to be a mix of my own personality and the fact I've been doing this for 35 years, predominantly dealing with men, and you rub off on people. So whilst I was learning, I would have seen those type of interactions and consciously or unconsciously emulated them. But yeah, I think there is a difference. But I know some really great men who are leaders who use soft skills a lot more than I do. And that's, again, their personality. And some of it is done for them to try and stand out and work in a different way than perhaps their predecessors did, to try and change the culture for the better within their organisations.
I think you've already answered this question in the last couple of minutes, but I'll ask it anyway. Is it possible that women have to adopt a more masculine style of leadership in manufacturing because nothing else would work?
I don't think so now, not at all. Not at all. And it's great to see some really, respected women that stay true to themselves, that they will dress how they want to dress, they will use the skills that they want to use. I'm a product of the 80s, so as well as the shoulder pads, we had to put on a mask and a persona, but we had to do that whether we were working in banking in the city or in manufacturing. It was done. And don't get me wrong, this was not only women doing that, all the men were doing the same, and like, we have to behave like that to be accepted. And it wouldn't necessarily have been their natural personality coming through. We were all put in boxes, and we all put ourselves in boxes. And I think now it's a lot more accepted that people are individuals, and they can perform in the role that best suits them and their team. Whereas 35 years ago, that didn't work.
Interesting. So, in a sense, you see the times they are changing, and they're becoming a lot less rigid, a lot less box-like, that people are thinking much more about other people.
I think so. I think when you look at the fact that it's difficult to recruit at the moment, you can't just recruit on the fact that you're paying extra pound an hour or 10 grand a year or whatever it is to win the person. You've then got to keep them, and you need to keep them. And it's not necessarily through the salary package that you're giving them, it's the other things that are important to them. And that might be flexible working, which you can do in manufacturing. I'm not talking hybrid that the media talks about, because most of that is not appropriate to most SMEs and manufacturers. But can we come in early next Friday because my son's in a school nativity play? Or can I leave early on a Tuesday by half an hour because my wife's hours have changed, and I'll just start earlier half an hour another day? But all those things that SMEs have traditionally done with their team, we need to make sure that people we're trying to attract know that, and having the culture to support them. SMEs have been quite good at that. I mean, we spent donkey's years trying to get rid of the them and us between production teams and non-production teams. That was very prevalent in the 80s. If you did the real work in a factory environment, you were somehow seen as less than someone who wore a suit and tie. And it's taken time to get that out, but I would say that's out in all SMEs now.
So, Kirsty, tell me about Women with Metal, how it started, what it is, and what's happening.
So earlier this year, I'd had a couple of conversations with people, and there are quite a lot of networking and development days in the metal industry, which is where I am. Um, but most of them, whilst they didn't specifically exclude women, um, they were golf days or clay pigeon shooting days or five-a-side football. And a chap I was talking to, who's heavily involved in one of them, went, "Kirst, can't you do something for the women? Can you run an afternoon tea?" And I thought, well, I don't really think most companies are going to allow their colleagues to go out for tea. And I thought, I'll do a small conference. There'll be, 30 people there or something. And the first conference was held on the 10th of October this year. We had over 110 women in the room and some chaps as well. And we sold out. So did this in sort of about 3 or 4 months, having no idea about event planning. Had some fantastic speakers that delivered return on investment for those companies who were so kind to support this initiative and pay to send their colleagues there. It was a fantastic day. And by the end of the month, we become a limited company. We're VAT registered, and we're moving forward. We have the first regional event, which is being held in Birmingham in the West Midlands in January, which is a workshop and networking session on goal setting. And that's at the Hilton Garden Inn on the 23rd of January. We'll then have 2 more regional events over the spring and summer. And then the main conference will be held, she takes a deep breath, at the International Convention Centre on the 29th of October 2024, which is hugely scary, but at the same time, absolutely exciting.
And so, what would delegates of either gender get from attending?
As well as sessions that work on leadership skills, how to look at finance. One of the things that we're not taught in schools is how to make your money work for you. We want to look at doing that. You know, people who are a lot wealthier than the majority of the UK populace know how to make their money work for them. I'd like to be able to help people do similar things. Networking is a skill in itself, and it's daunting to walk into a room and see people there and maybe know only one or two people, and it's to give you tools to be able to do that, which is going to help develop your business career, your professional career. One of the things we looked at last year was unconscious bias in the workplace, how to recognize it, how to work with it, how to even use it to your advantage. And personal branding in the workplace is really, really important. And we looked at that last year. One of the things I really wanted to do, which we delivered in 2023, was to make it a safe space for women to talk about women's health in the workplace. So the menopause, so to talk about periods, all things like that. And what I want to do in 2024 is keep that safe space, but also give our male colleagues a safe space to say, look, you want to be an ally, you are an ally, but you're not quite sure if you're allowed to ask that. Am I allowed to say that? Or is that going to be wrong? But how do I help? Because I don't know what I'm allowed to say and how I'm allowed to support. And let's remove those barriers, because making an equitable workplace gives huge benefits to both men and women. They're happier and healthier in their work. They're performing better. It's win-win-win for men, women, and the company themselves.